Today's episode is sponsored by Puffin Books UK. Good morning, campers, and welcome to Radio Camp Half-Blood, a Percy Jackson read-along podcast. I'm Bea.
And I'm Zach.
And this week, we read Chapter 13 of Percy Jackson's Sea of Monsters, Annabeth Tries to Swim Home.
And she certainly does jump ship.
I don't know why I assumed that she got so annoyed with Percy that she just jumped into the water. Like, that was my headcanon of this chapter, but that's not what happens. Something else happens. I should have probably guessed it would be mythical in origin.
I thought I almost spoiled it. It was there are a lot of myths with pirate ships in the ocean.
Yeah, I don't know why I didn't connect those dots exactly. It's weird because sometimes it seems almost like I'm precognitive about some of the stuff that happens that I immediately guess right away. But this seems pretty obvious, but I just didn't, it didn't occur to me.
Well, I think for this chapter, there's a lot of double meanings because technically she was swimming home. She was swimming home to her weird delusions.
I guess that's true. Yeah, this chapter, compared to some of the other ones we've been covering recently, is pretty straightforward. Not a ton happens. It's just kind of the whole interaction with the sirens, basically. We learn actually some backstory stuff just because we actually finally get the story about Talia and about Annabeth's specific trauma regarding Cyclopses, but other than that, it's mainly just the interaction.
Yeah, no, I really like this chapter a lot. There's a lot of weird, surreal things that happened, as well as, Percy does some selfless things like saves Annabeth. And one of my favorite things about this is he doesn't have that much common sense because he does two things that aren't common sense. One, take Annabeth's weapons. Two, oh yeah, Annabeth can't breathe underwater. Let's take her down deeper.
Yeah, whoopsie.
Whoopsie.
Yeah, well, I mean, he fixes it in the end, but yeah. I did like the beginning of the chapter where we have more of just the fun, fancy-free ability that Percy has to control this ship at amazing speeds, with, the blink of an eye.
Yeah, I feel like he's at the front of the ship, almost like Titanic, I'm the king of the world.
Yeah, it's very satisfying to hear him talk about controlling the ship and how he even knows how fast it's going.
I'm sure with his magical nautical powers, he's just singing sea shanties all day. What do you do with a drunken sailor? What do you do with a drunken sailor? And Annabeth's please stop, Percy. Please stop.
I keep thinking of just the Sea of Thieves game, and for some reason he suddenly has a hurdy-gurdy and he's just turning the crank on the hurdy-gurdy.
Annabeth, look at all this grog down below. Percy, don't drink that. You're 12.
Yeah, don't suggest drinking grog if you're 12. Or really any age, because it's probably gross. Same with hardtack.
Well, it's 300 years old, so it's probably he opens it up, it's just dust. Well, luckily, they're not going to Monkey Island because Percy Jackson and Annabeth Chase have stolen the Queen Anne's Revenge. Blackbeard's ship. So Percy Jackson's just having this super nautical gnarly time.
Yeah, we really get to see his powers in this chapter because he just, we see his nautical powers, his ability to steer ships, his innate understanding of how fast they're going and also what latitude and longitude they're at. And then later we get to see more of his swimming skills and his ability to sort of just summon water at his will. There's a lot of really impressive stuff that happens here.
Here's the problem that I have with this. Is Percy Jackson is automatically good at anything in the water. Do other demigods, I know there's certain demigods, but this is going to be a spoiler, but I know most demigods in their domain, do they have the same kind of powers that are similar to Percy? Let's say Annabeth, does she get super smart when she's in the presence of a library or knowledge? If she's on Bill Nye the Science Guy, does she become Bill Gates smart? Or is it something along the lines of what about Clarice? If she's on the battlefield, does she just get better at fighting? And there's same principles here with Percy Jackson.
Yeah, I mean that's the logic that they've established that if, a demigod has a specific skill set passed down from whatever godparent they have, then that's the skill set they have. And it's also, I mean, to be fair, narratively speaking, has to be the case where if Percy was oh, well, I can do this in the water, but not this, where would you draw the line, really?
Well, the line's simple. Percy Jackson should just be able to breathe underwater. But like so if we break down Percy Jackson, when he's in the water, these are the things that he can do. He can breathe underwater, he has super speed, he has super strength, and he has fast healing abilities.
Yeah, and he can summon the water to like bend at his will, so he can like shoot himself like a bullet or whatever.
Oh yeah, and he can talk to fish and horses, and he's like, so we pretty much, Percy Jackson's Aquaman at this point.
Yeah, he's Aquaman. I mean, we've established that he's basically Aquaman. He's Aquaman mixed with a waterbender. He can do it all.
In the situation, would Annabeth just be like Mati from Captain Planet and have the ability of heart? Like, just be completely useless?
Will of mind, so close. That's very useful, though, I think.
I have water powers. Luke's like, I can deliver messages. Clarice is like, I'm really good at like, sounds like an awful like version of the X-Men. Clarice is like, I'm good at murdering people. Annabeth is just like, I'm super smart. Let's go to library.
See, the thing is, you're just describing the books, though. They really are like that.
Like, it sounds like a joke, but it's like people can realize that there's like certain ridiculousnesses to the power levels a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, they're a little overpowered, but I think it balances it out because they don't have like powers in other regard. Though, I mean, it is mentioned that Annabeth is a strong swimmer also, which I was kind of shocked by. Like, oh, I guess she can do everything.
Well, I mean, she doesn't have to be a strong swimmer. She just has to make sure she doesn't get hit by the jagged rocks.
Yeah, well, that's like a whole other thing, and that's why Percy is specifically well suited for that kind of thing.
Luckily, Percy Jackson is great at swimming and doing all these things because they're literally in the middle of the ocean in the Bermuda Triangle. And what ends up happening is Percy Jackson is totally like just steering the ship heading towards the Cyclops lair. Annabeth gets terribly seasick and she goes below deck. I like how they describe her like she got as green as guacamole.
The color of guacamole. Yeah, I like that description too. I thought that was funny.
So she goes below deck and like takes a nap. And Percy's like, this is going to be fun. Just sing some sea shanties. And then the next day, Annabeth's like, Percy, you haven't slept in like 24 hours. So Percy, you should go sleep down below in the hammock. And he's like, oh, okay. And he does. And then he has some weird dreams.
Yeah, he dreams about Luke's cabin in the Princess Andromeda, right?
But yeah, so Percy's like in the cabin and he sees the sarcophagus of Kronos. And he's like, you know what? I'm going to end this real quickly. And he like opens it up as Kronos is taunting him.
That'll go well.
And you know what? It doesn't end well because there's someone there trying to stop Percy.
Yeah, someone dressed in punk clothes, I think it's described.
Oh, this is like 2005 like punk clothes. Like I'm doing like quotation marks. Like I'm thinking of like plaid like skinny jeans, like chain loop belt.
Oh, you're just talking about stuff from like Hot Topic basically.
Oh, this is Hot Topic. This person's Hot Topic.
The trip pants. Remember those? Yeah, she wore punk-style clothes with silver chains on her wrists. She had spiky black hair, dark eyeliner around her stormy blue eyes, and a spray of freckles across her nose. She looked familiar, but I wasn't sure why.
Why do you think so?
Yeah, I have no idea who this person is. This isn't Talia, is it? I feel like I would have remembered her being described that way.
Have they described Thalia in any way?
I haven't noticed if they have, that this would, like, jump out at me as, like, definitely her. And then, yeah, she mentioned someone else, Leave It to Me, and Aegis something. I don't know how to pronounce it.
It's Aegis.
Aegis. It might be Aegis. Yeah, there's an E in there. Aegis.
Because it's kind of like when you have those two syllables. For a person that can barely speak, it's AE usually is like an I. Like I.
That's true. Like Spätzle.
Or, ketchup, catsup, tomato, tomato. Aegis.
Yeah, this is a really weird dream. I don't really know how to decipher it. So it's worth noting that Percy doesn't have a dream about Grover at all this time, which it seems like every dream he's had thus far in the book has been regarding Grover and like the whole empathy link thing of him envisioning what's going on over there. But instead he has this whole other separate, I guess it's just a dream as opposed to like an empathy link vision.
See, that's kind of the most confusing thing when you have Percy Jackson going to sleep. It's almost like you're playing like Russian roulette. is that it's either you can't tell when it's an actual dream or a premonition or something to come. That's the thing with like dreams in like Greek culture. They're supposed to be like flashes of the future, possibly, or things to come, or even dire warnings.
Yeah, you really can't tell. It's hard to discern exactly. I feel like this is just a dream because it doesn't seem to have any like of the indicators of a vision, but I don't know. It's hard to say. There's a lot going on. The description of the girl that he meets: she tapped her wrist and her silver chains transformed, flattening and expanding into a huge shield. It was silver and bronze with the monstrous face of Medusa protruding from the center. It looked like a death mask, as if the Gorgon's real head had been pressed into the metal. I didn't know if that was true or if the shield could really petrify me, but I looked away. Just being near it made me cold with fear. I got a feeling that in a real fight, the bearer of that shield would be almost impossible to beat. Any sane enemy would turn and run.
So it's like the idea of playing on one's fears, almost.
Yeah, it's interesting. Because then you're like, all of a sudden, I'm like, oh, wait, I guess something good is going to happen in his dream, where like the Kronos is just defeated by this random girl in his dream, but then she opens the sarcophagus and is like engulfed by golden light. So whatever that means, I don't know what that means.
You know, what you just said is really interesting.
Really? Did I say anything interesting?
I don't know. Did you say anything interesting?
Well, okay, well now you're just messing with me. I have no idea.
Well, I'll tell you who this person is. This is going to be a spoiler. It's Jessica Haircut. Don't you know?
Ah, yes. Jessica Haircut. Anyway, that was a weird dream. I can't begin to decipher that. I can't even decipher my own dreams sometimes, so this is kind of from left field.
I mean, that's like the weird thing when it comes to dreams. Like, what is the weirdest dream you've ever had be?
Oh, I've had a lot of weird dreams, but there's one that stayed with me for a really long time because it was just so, I don't know, inexplicable. It's always weird when like a famous person is just like an extra in your dream and you're like, why are you here?
Hi, I'm Troy McClure, and I'm in B's dream. You might remember some such dreams as...
Yeah, basically like that. I remember distinctly I had a dream once that I was at the mall, and I looked over at the Desert Moon Cafe. I don't know if that's even a chain that's everywhere, but it's basically a Chipotle. It's just bad Mexican food. And I looked at the food court, and standing in line at the Desert Moon Cafe was none other than Kirstie Alley.
Wait, what? Why?
Yeah, listen, I don't know why. And I am confused why Kirstie Alley is there, because at the time she was a Jenny Craig sort of spokeswoman, so she was eating the Jenny Craig food and not the Desert Moon Cafe, which is not good for you. Kirstie Alley, why are you eating that burrito? You shouldn't be eating that burrito. You're Jenny Craig's, like, person. You're supposed to be eating the Jenny Craig food. Desert Moon Cafe, not super great for you. And she got so offended that she reaches into her purse and pulls out a tiny handgun and shoots me in the face. And then I wake up. So that's one of the weirder dreams I've had, I would say. And I think I had that dream over a decade ago, and I still remember it vividly.
Oh my god, that like reminds me of actually like a dream that I've had, which was, I don't know why, but I remember we went to visit a prison, like as a tour, the fun little thing. It wasn't Alcatraz, it was some terrible prison somewhere. But like the dream that I had was like, for some reason I had a dream that the prison was open and all the inmates, all they did all day was disco. I don't know why. It made no sense. And I was it was a scary dream too. Like honestly, like I woke up like kind of frightened.
They just very aggressively discoed? What do you mean?
Like they just danced and they like had disco parties. Like there was like a gigantic disco ball.
It was Disco Inferno, I guess.
Oh yeah, it was a disco inferno.
It sounds very visceral.
So Percy Jackson, you know, nautical boy genius, wakes up in like a jolt and like falls out of his hammock and gets up on deck, and Annabeth's like, oh, by the way, Percy, we're really close to the island of the Sirens.
I'm gonna be honest, this is kind of dumb, the whole thing with Annabeth.
Well, that's not even the dumb part yet. Actually, we forgot we forgot this huge chunk of story, didn't we? And they're about to have like this huge speech, but we've totally like missed something, and I think this happens before this, and that is, we'll just say it's like right here, and then they go to the island of Sirens, is Annabeth kind of starts telling him about the story about why she really hates Cyclopses, like the real reason.
For some reason, when I thought about Annabeth having an issue with Cyclops, I connected the dots. Probably, I had an idea it had something to do with Talia. We talked about that earlier in the book. She kind of hints at it, doesn't really go into detail. I assumed that it'd be like Cyclops is closer to Half-Blood Hill, but this all happens when they're still in the city somewhere. In, where was it again? Bushwick? Flatbush? Oh no, I'm confused. Yeah, in Flatbush.
Okay, for our people that are not from New York, could you explain the geography, if you know?
Oh God, do you think that I know the map of New York that well that I could describe where Flatbush is? I have no idea.
I'm guessing it's like if you go to that location, it's where, Rick Riordan wrote it in a coffee shop. Like, let's set it here.
Yeah, it's a neighborhood in Brooklyn.
It's really unique when you have a person has like such deep like hatred to the point of where finally she's able to spill the beans on why this is happening. And you know what? Even though it doesn't feel like, they didn't get to Camp Half-Blood in time, it's kind of, this is the main reason, because Grover took the wrong turn. If he hadn't taken that wrong turn, it's almost like, have you ever seen The Curious Case of Benjamin Button?
I have.
Like there's the scene where he's talking about like, if that guy didn't get that cup of coffee, didn't pay with the change, all things would have been differently. I think this is kind of like, she kind of like thinks about, it's the butterfly effect of having, if one thing out of this order was different and, Grover, let's say, didn't take that wrong turn, or they figured out what was happening faster, they would have been at Camp Half-Blood before they were overrun by monsters, and then Thalia wouldn't have died.
Yeah, it's interesting that Annabeth doesn't blame Grover at all for taking a wrong turn, but instead blames the Cyclops because, they would have ever even encountered the Cyclops.
I think it's a little bit of column A, column B, and I think she also blames herself.
She blames herself to some extent, but she also blames just the Cyclops in general. And it's a pretty traumatic, horrifying experience, the whole description. I mean, I was like actually really horrified because there's something about how smart the Cyclops seems to be in this story where it's not like they're just being randomly attacked and they're having like a sword fight or whatever. It's not so actiony. It's more like mental manipulation of him like tricking them. It reminds me a lot of like the Jabberjay scenes in the Hunger Games, imitating people's voices and stuff. There's actually a lot of that in this chapter because there's the nightmare that the encounter with the Cyclops that Annabeth describes that has a lot to do with like him imitating the voice of her dad and imitating the voice of different loved ones to try and trick everybody and get them separated and lure them all to this one spot. And then later on will encounter the sirens, which is like a similar kind of thing of like imitating loved ones to like distract people. It's interesting that it happens in the same chapter that we learn about this.
I believe it's like it plays on one's fears, especially like having the idea of trust. It's like, oh, my dad will come here and protect me. I like using movie stuff. I always think of the part in Spaceballs with her dad. He's like, fooled you. I can't believe you fell for it. The oldest trick in the book.
Yeah. I mean, it's maybe like an overused trope of like tricking people into thinking that someone is their like loved one, but it is very effective and creepy, I would say.
I think it's the same way of like having like the evil queen in Snow White when she turned into like a really creepy frail woman. It's almost like that's like it's harmless. Of course my dad or someone's gonna protect us, or Annabeth's gonna scream, so all the people are going to automatically go the wrong way because that's what they're gonna do.
This also explains Annabeth's like total freak out on the Princess Andromeda when Tyson was able to channel Luke's voice and like project it out of his own voice, much like the Cyclops that she encountered in the building that, caused the whole thing with Talia. It's like she's just so creeped out by this specific ability to like imitate voices because it is like a very uncanny, bizarre thing to be able to do.
Well, I'm sure most definitely it's going to be something that like falls into the brain of like uncanniness, especially when you have something like, I'll give an example. I will give a prime example in real life. I've met a lot of friends that I've online gamed with. Like we'd either go to a convention or we'd meet up. And it's so weird. You're so used to hearing their voices, but you don't know like what they look like. And when you finally get to meet them and you hear their voices come out of their body, it is so bizarre and so weird, it doesn't make sense. If you're so used to hearing someone's voice but not their face, you kind of don't believe what you're kind of witnessing. Like, this doesn't seem right.
It's so funny. The other day, me and Sarah were talking about me doing impersonations, and she's just like, sometimes you do an impersonation, B, and it's like someone was channeled into the room, and it's a little creepy.
I'm sure the same thing happens as well as with people that have like dummies or like know how to like throw their voices. Just imagine like the horror movie with like Lamb Chop. I'm coming to get you.
uh, that is pretty horrifying, actually. But yeah, we finally like know the whole origin story of the Cyclops situation. I guess it does make sense that she would be weird around Tyson because it sounds like pretty horrifying and traumatizing. Even like Percy, when he's hearing the story years later, he gets like sort of the heebie-jeebies.
So, B, now I have a question for you. Do you think Annabeth's prejudiceness towards Cyclops is justified in the situation, or do you think it's still like an unnecessary thing, but in the plot of the book, it happens?
I think that there's a difference between justified and understandable. It makes sense that she would have like an innate sort of trauma associated with Cyclopses and have like a really bad association with that, and that would be hard for her to deal with. I don't think that then justifies the way she treats Tyson and talks to him. Because there's like a difference between like your gut reaction and your behavior, I think. And I also think it was probably her responsibility to be upfront sooner about why she was so upset about this. Because it's one thing if you're like around something that reminds you of a traumatic event and then like it upsets you and then you could just remove yourself from the situation. But if that extends itself to like a person, I think it's probably the balls in her court to be like upfront and say, I have a thing about Cyclopses, but it's not on you and I'm like working on it. Do you know what I mean? Because I think she just immediately was like rude and mean to Tyson in a way that wasn't justified or explained.
I mean, she's taking it out on Tyson in a way that she feels justified, even though Tyson is like this big, innocent, like goof of a person that's amazing. And I guess it's the same thing of having someone that like, that kind of reminds you of that terrible situation or going back in the day. And you're kind of just, that's the only way to take out your frustration is just to take it out on something that's very similar.
Mm-hmm. I mean, like, an example that I would think in real life would be like if you were bitten by a dog, for instance, and then you met another dog and you kicked the dog. That's like not justifiable. Do you know what I mean? You can be nervous around the dog and you can express that and like be clear, like, oh, I've been nervous around dogs before, but you can't take it out on the dog that didn't do anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I totally understand what you're saying. I mean, especially if you kick that dog, chances are you've just kicked John Wick's dog, so you're screwed.
And then that starts a whole thing. With a revenge plot.
And usually when it comes to a dog that bites, they usually have been traumatized in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, so then it's sort of like a catch-22 thing of like, oh, then you like beget the thing that you fear most of all. Is like, oh, you're going to mistreat the Cyclops? You think it's going to benefit you in any way? Probably not.
I mean, when it comes to, if you really think about it, Annabeth acting monstrous towards Tyson makes her no better than that actual Cyclops that threatened her. If you can find like not even like a moral high ground, but if you can find like just, hey, this is what it is. I have a bad experience with Cyclopses, but I'm really trying to work on it, or let's try to find like some way to do this, because she knows Tyson is not an evil malice person. Like, he's got Rainbow, like he's like friends with all the ponies, and like he's like the nicest guy. But by proxy, Annabeth can't accept that as an actual like thing of reality. Like, she substitutes her own reality. And she's like, no matter what, all Cyclopses are bad. It's not great. I guess it's like the equivalent of saying like all people from the South are all racists.
Or what? It's any prejudice. It's like even if you have a bad experience with X, Y, and Z person, you can't like then generalize. You know what I mean? Based on like inalienable things, like being a Cyclops. That's not something you decide.
Unfortunately, it does happen. But I know in the story, of course, she's gonna have to have this character arc. Like that is like. That's not even like a spoiler. Like, she has to have this character arc of, oh yeah, she has to understand Tyson and all this stuff. That's like a traditional character arc is you have someone that hates something, and by the end of that movie, or by the end of that script, or by the end of that structure, she needs to have a different way of thinking. That's why I actually really enjoyed the movie Gran Torino by Clint Eastwood. So in the Gran Torino, we have this character who is this old, like, racist, hate-filled man, and like he has this prejudice against people that are Korean because he was in the Korean War, and this Korean family moves in right next to him. And throughout the course of the movie, he kind of like befriends them, and he's dying of cancer. And it's like this great little turnaround moment in which I think that it's a really good, solid movie. It's kind of like follows that traditional thing of, hey, we have like this racist, bigoted person. How can we make him a much better human being, like to the point of understanding?
It's a complicated lesson to teach because I think, I mean, this is a children's book, so you can't get too complicated, but it's up to Annabeth to get over her prejudice, right? And I do think it could dangerously veer into Tyson is here to teach her a lesson about how Cyclopses aren't all bad, which is like not like the best way to talk about prejudice, to like put the onus on the person who's being like prejudiced against, basically, is like this idea that you're like, oh, you're a teaching moment. Like, see, Tyson's so nice. He's like the model Cyclops. He has to be perfect and kind in every way to teach Annabeth that some Cyclopses aren't like that. And that could be like a bad lesson in some ways, because it's like, that should be her own personal growth. So maybe it's like a good thing in some ways that Tyson is like out of the picture. We don't know if he's dead or if he's not. I don't know. I think he's not. But I think that is probably beneficial to the story, because then it's more of like an internal lesson she's teaching herself, like thinking and self-reflecting, like, oh, I guess that's kind of an unreasonable thing to assume about someone, because the reason that the Cyclops was bad wasn't just because he was a Cyclops. There was other circumstances.
I mean, when you have this, and it's you can veer into like almost like being obscene and having, you know, you have like the moral, like let's say like super good or like lawful good of Tyson. And it's like you have him as basically Cyclops Jesus, and like everything he does is right, and everything he has no wrong faults or anything. So Annabeth is just like, I hate Cyclops, blah, 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 blah. And then it's like throughout the course of the thing, she doesn't really learn anything because she realizes all Cyclopses are bad. Except this one bad one over here, which we did never kill. It's almost like the white whale. And I guess it's kind of the same prejudice with like, oh my God, Captain Ahab and Moby Dick.
Captain Ahab is prejudiced against whales.
Yes, he did. Hey, the whale did cripple him. And he's going to go buy thunder to like kill this whale, even at the cost of his own crew and his own ship and his own moral, sanity, to kill this whale that crippled him.
In general, I just hope it goes down more of the path of her learning herself, I guess, or like just kind of thinking long and hard about why she has these prejudices, as opposed to being like, oh, well, Tyson is good, so like this sort of like object lesson, because that can be like not like the best way to convey how to get over prejudices, to be like, oh, you need to be around this specific person and they need to teach you how to be a good person, because that's like not really a practical way to go about like unlearning hate.
Well, no, so when it comes to that, like there's plenty of stories where this works, but there's has to be the idea of like you guys have to both be in that mindset, or you have to be in a situation where you spend so much time with the person that you can't just be with that one person. Like I can't really give an example. I can't even think of one right now because there's so many of them. But you have like a character which, let's just say is racist and ends up with the person that he's racist with. Actually, I have an example. Okay. So the example I'm about to give is from this movie from the 80s. It's called Enemy Mine, where it's about this astronaut and this alien crash land on a planet, and they're both mortal enemies. And throughout the course of that movie, they have to survive together, and they end up becoming friends. And both of their like empires hate each other to the point of they just want to wipe each other out. And I'm not going to spoil this movie because it's so good, but you'll understand if you watch it why it works, is because you understand both of them, you understand who they are as people, and you understand like, hey, their cultures are actually very similar than what you would think. Yeah, and look, if you have like a ham-fisted lesson of having like Tyson as Cyclops Jesus, it doesn't quite work. You have to understand that no one's perfect, almost. And we could talk about this forever, but it's like you can be like very dangerous of having like, if you don't see the differences and the similarities, you're not really learning a lesson. You're only learning one point of view, and you're again now creating a new bias. So
yeah, or like all Cyclopses are bad except for
Tyson.
He's an exception because he's really nice.
Then you have the new moral dilemma of Annabeth now thinks that, oh, all Cyclopses are good. What happens when she meets a bad Cyclops, like a monstrous Cyclops again? What happens then?
It's more just all people are individuals and they each have their own strengths and weaknesses, and it's up to you to determine that. And you don't that's the whole root of prejudice, to prejudge. You don't prejudge anything. You just take people at face value based on their actions, which I mean I think like boils down to a really good lesson in a YA book, is to just be like, oh well, who you are, like unchangeable facts about you aren't what make you a good or bad person. You're the way you look, what race you are, whether you have a disability, whatever. It does, all of that stuff is a part of you, but it's not what makes you a good or bad person.
I mean, isn't that really one of the lessons that should be taught? Is just being like, everyone is an individual, everyone has these thoughts and feelings, and you shouldn't take out on a person because one apple is bad in the bunch.
Yeah, I mean, it also speaks to like how people treat those with differences, because, you know, Annabeth has this whole like prejudice towards Cyclopses, but she doesn't have a prejudice against demigods, even though Luke has betrayed her. You know what I mean? She still trusts demigods because she herself is a demigod. So it's sort of like, oh, well, there's this added element of like, oh, he looks different than me. Has monstrous qualities and all of that, which is like another sort of lesson in like assuming that a physical difference is tantamount to like a moral judgment.
We know this is what the character arc is Annabeth isn't going to be like prejudiced against Cyclopses, except now we have this new thing what's going to be coming up where they get to the Island of Sirens. Annabeth like, oh, I know this myth. If you listen to the song, you're going to jump right overboard. So Percy, we need to put wax in our ears.
Except she's not going to, which is like a very frustrating thing, honestly, because she's supposed to be smart. And that's not very smart.
In theory, if you listen to the Sirens song, the song is like, it's going to get to your heartstrings. It's going to be like a Phil Collins song. It's going to like really get into like what makes you tick.
They say the Sirens sing the truth about what you desire. They tell you things about yourself you didn't even realize. That's what's so enchanting. If you survive, you become wiser. I want to hear them. How often will I get that chance? And then Percy says, coming from most people, this would have made no sense, but Annabeth being who she was, well, if she could struggle through ancient Greek architecture books and enjoy documentaries on the History Channel, I guessed the Sirens would appeal to her too.
Like, honestly, if you knew like what your fatal flaw was or like something that you want to like learn, this would be a great opportunity. Just don't do it by yourself. That or like pop in like a Phil Collins CD.
Yeah, still a bad idea though, and he forgets to disarm her, which will come back later.
Well, that's kind of like he didn't think that she was going to do this.
Yeah.
But, you know, if you know anything about myths or temptation, oh, googly moogly. Like, this is bad. Annabeth is smart enough to realize Percy doesn't want this. I want this. You're going to tie me to the center mass, and no matter what I do, scream or beg, you're not going to let me. Again, it's like young Frankenstein. Whatever happens in this room, do not let me out. Let me out. Let me out. Can't you know a joke when you see one?
I mean, this is just asking for something to go wrong. Like, you know that she's going to escape and she's going to jump in the water and try to die. Or not try to die, but die in the process of trying to get to whatever the Sirens are calling to her. We do find out eventually what the Sirens are making her hear/see.
Yeah, I actually have a problem with this. Like, in my opinion, I think Percy shouldn't have seen what he saw. I think it could have been something that Annabeth kind of like brings up over time.
Yeah, you think? I guess because whatever he like touches her and then the magic seeps through him. I don't exactly know how it works.
See, that's why I think it'd be more effective to like hear it from Annabeth rather than seeing it in a vision from Percy Jackson.
Yeah. Though I think it is also a good dramatic moment where she talks about some of the things she envisioned, but not everything. So that like speaks to like what she feels comfortable talking about. So that's like a different kind of revelatory thing about what she prioritizes.
Well, I think it's more of just having like character growth of having, hey, Percy, I trust you in this extent of I'm going to tell you what I saw, and kind of like we're going to grow upon this a little bit because one of her fatal flaws
is hummus.
Has a lot of hubris. Oh, wait, she's got a lot of hummus.
She's full of hummus. They really talk some smack about hummus in this episode here. I love this conversation because it's so relatable, because when she says, hold on, I want to find the exact phrasing that they say. Don't you ever feel like, what if the world really is messed up? What if we could do it all over again from scratch? No more war, nobody homeless, no more summer reading homework. I'm listening. I mean, the West represents a lot of the best things mankind ever did. That's why the fire is still burning. That's why Olympus is still around. But sometimes you just see the bad stuff, you know, and you start thinking the way Luke does. If I could tear this all down, I would do it better. Don't you ever feel that way? Like you could do a better job if you ran the world? And then Percy, no, me running the world would kind of be a nightmare. That is like the most relatable quote in all of the book so far, is me running the world would kind of be a nightmare. I feel like I've said that phrase almost exactly within this past week. I've said that.
Yeah, no, it's like so interesting when you have a character such as Percy Jackson, who's very like down to earth, and he's very like, he understands reality. Whereas when you take someone like Annabeth, like, okay, let's face it, both you and I are very creative people. Like, we like to create things, and sometimes we have these ambitions of like, we can create things as big as the gods. And there's other people, it's like Farmer John up the street. Well, the harvest is coming in, and I have to worry about that, rather than we have to worry about making our deadlines. Like how much can I get done in the day? How many words can I write? I think that's really interesting when you have like a creative person versus someone that's very just down to earth, like Percy Jackson is, because Percy's mom isn't like that at all. She's actually very creative. Like, she wants to be a writer. She wants to do all this stuff, but yet she doesn't have like this ambition. Her ambition is Percy Jackson, and that's it. Annabeth doesn't quite know what she wants in her life now. She kind of knows, like, I want to be an architect. I want to get my family back together. I want to get Luke, save him from the dark side. Yeah, fix everything.
Well, she wants to fix everything. That's like her. She thinks she can fix everything. Well, like Percy's like, I can't fix everything. I could barely fix anything right now.
Well, I mean, there's certain things that's like obviously like ambition. Again, hubris. She has this huge thing of hummus that's like, I just want to like share it with everybody. And like, some people are going to enjoy my hummus, and then other people might not enjoy my hummus. But in the end of the day, I have like a really good hummus.
With tahini and everything.
Literally, we have jumped ship a little bit, and we forgot that, because this is like this chapter, you can talk about some of the big elements, but again, there's like, we kind of like talk about the little things, and having, you know, Percy puts the wax in his ears, and they go towards the island of sirens, and of course, Annabeth's like, get me out of here, Percy! Like, I want to let go and live on the island of the sirens. And Percy's like, nah, I'm good. And like, he takes his eyes off Annabeth for a couple of seconds to steer the boat, even though I'm sure there's like nautical cruise control.
Yeah, he just puts it kind of on autopilot for a minute, because he just has his own magical boat autopilot situation going.
It's almost like the joke of having like, he has like the rear view mirror, or like the mirror you adjust, and Annabeth isn't there anymore. And it's like, oh no. And he looks off to the side, and Annabeth is literally trying to swim for home.
So it's a relief that he has all the powers he has, because he sure can like maneuver through like sunken ships and mines, which he realizes too late, where he's like, oh, I guess those were mines, huh? That would have been bad if he hit into one. Yeah, so he like kind of bobs and weaves. I don't know how Annabeth is able to move through all of this, because she is a strong swimmer, as Percy notes, but she doesn't have like Poseidon powers.
Well, I mean, it's like, I think it's the idea if she's determined to get to that island, so she's gonna like look for every danger, or it's the sirens, they want to have like a delectable food.
I guess. So if she were to die on the way there, they wouldn't have a snack.
Well, if she blew up from the mine, she wouldn't have a snack. If she got skewered by the rocks, they wouldn't have a snack.
Bite-sized Annabeth. Explosion.
Yeah, but then you get like charboiled, and like, do you really want like a well-done person?
I don't want any kind of person.
Well, I don't want to eat people. Like, we don't condone cannibalism on this podcast.
We don't condone cannibalism.
My advice to the sirens is, please don't eat children. Like, I feel like if you're going to eat someone, go get a cruise ship or something. Don't, like, go big or just stay home and, you know, have like a little bit of a fast. Because Percy Jackson, you know, barnacle boy genius, like, it's like zooming through the water trying to save Annabeth before she hits the black beach. Percy Jackson puts his head out of the water because he still has the wax in his ears.
He shoots up
And
out of the water like a dolphin and just tucks back down.
I really wish I had that ability to like do like a dolphin sound like some people have.
I mean, I could probably do it if I practice, but I'm not going to try here.
It's just dolphin sound, dolphin sound. Or no, it's like the way I'm picturing it is almost like in Free Willy. Like he like just jumps over Annabeth. So Percy Jackson like sees off into the distance what the sirens actually look like. And you know what? There are many different interpretations of what sirens are, but this is actually one of the most accurate of like they're like these ugly like bird people.
Yeah, I guess I never pictured them looking that way. I always kind of pictured them more mermaid-like.
Actually, that's okay. So I might be wrong about this, but sirens were first and they kind of developed into the mermaid because that was the thing that mermaids would do is their mermaid songs would draw men towards the water and the mermaids would pick them up and drown them in the ocean.
Okay. So kind of combined together in some ways.
But I mean, you have like the different interpretations of mermaids. Like I'm not a person that like is steeped in mermaid lore. That would actually be Meg, who is like completely steeped in that, and they could easily tell us all about mermaids.
Yeah. Sarah is too, actually, because she wrote her, she did like an illustration final project in college that was like an adaptation of The Little Mermaid. So she read like 2 giant biographies about Hans Christian Andersen and did a lot of study into the folklore of mermaids. We should have her on the show sometime.
Well, hopefully, maybe soon, ? Winky face. A lot of things like kind of carry over and a lot of things with Greek mythology, like they'll carry over to different aspects. Like even though like the Roman gods that are like technically, they're literally Greek gods, but better OCs.
Yeah, with different names. Yeah. I mean, that's like a more obvious comparison, but there's always like going to be overlap in different folklore kind of stuff.
Even like if you think of like, I don't really like to use most like religions, like practicing religions right now. That is like, if you look at Zeus, what do you think of characteristics of Zeus be? If you think of Zeus, what do you think about?
In the clouds with a big white beard and a robe.
Yeah, he's like God. That's
Yeah.
like, that's literally God.
Well, I mean, some ideas of God, but yeah.
Well, some ideas that like when you think of God or like Father Christmas or Father Time or whatever.
Like a cartoon. If you were watching an episode of The Simpsons and there was a God there, he would look like that.
Same as with Santa Claus. You have like it's like really interesting when you have like cultures like when they take the best of little things and like
Sinterklaas. Saint Nicholas. So I guess the sirens are like spiritually connected to the idea of mermaids. It's a similar concept. It's a logical concept coming from someone of a certain time who lives as a sailor and keeps seeing people drown or like crash into rocks or whatever. They come up with stories to justify why that happens.
well, it's the same as with why do we have mythology is to explain events. Well, people are falling overboard and drowning, not because maybe they're dying or they're sick of this and they have like the sea madness. Is they hear a beautiful song and they jump overboard, yeah. Whereas like how you explain like thunder and lightning, oh, it's Thor or it's Zeus.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about just telling stories about the world that you live in when you don't have the natural sciences to explain it.
Well, I want to be called a scientist.
Yep, that's exactly what they call them. I took a meteorology class and it was one of the most boring classes I've ever taken in my life.
I find like the name meteorology like makes me sad because it's like, dude, I get to learn about meteors and like space debris just like crashing
nope.
into the earth that might potentially kill us. Oh no, we see if like it's warm today
Yeah.
or like
Let's
cold
talk
the
about
next day.
adiabatic heating for the 50th time. Let's talk about the dew point.
Yeah. We get off track, but it's like these are the conversations that are fun when it comes to Percy Jackson because you don't really think about them when like you're in the moment. Because there's a lot of things when it comes to, Percy Jackson or even... Actually, I hate to use it, B. In Harry Potter, in the Goblet of Fire...
Here he is. He's back. Our good boy Harry.
They're mermaids. They're mermaids in the second trial in the Triwizard Tournament.
That's true. There are mermaids. And they do like beckon with like voices, right, and call people.
Yes, yes, they do. I was so close, but then I realized there's a Harry Potter reference.
There
Oh
always
no.
is, isn't there? Well, also, I mean, like we've talked about this, like Harry Potter based on a lot of mythology, which is also Percy Jackson's based on mythology. There's a lot of like they're drawing from similar traditions a lot of the time.
It's just the classics.
Yeah. And then fantasy often draws from mythology and blah blah blah, going back forever and always. Stories are the same. People are the same, and we tell like the same 5 stories. We just give characters different names.
And sometimes we give them superpowers.
Basically.
So Percy Jackson saves Annabeth from these terrible sirens. All they wanted to do was give them their beautiful songs. What type of song do you think they were singing? Like what type of like melody? I'm feeling
I
like
mean, I keep thinking about the Hocus Pocus, like, Come Little Children, I Take Thee Away song, like something like equal parts kind of like interesting but also creepy.
okay, so all the sirens look like the Sanderson sisters.
I mean, no, because they look like vultures, but like the voice, the style of music, I imagine, is something similar to that.
Do you think it changes per person? Like, do you think like someone like now they start listening and they hear like mumble rap?
That would be so funny. I don't think anybody has been drawn by mumble rap, even people who listen to mumble rap.
We're throwing shade at mumble rap.
I mean, I'm just saying, it doesn't seem like the kind of music that you'd hear it and be like, I'm drawn to it. Like, it doesn't seem to fit
Well, I mean,
as far as a genre.
Percy Jackson like listens and he just hears like a like beautiful rendition of Gucci Gang. He's like, I have to throw myself into the water.
Yeah, I just keep thinking, like, what song would be playing to, like, lure you into the water?
Oh, for me, it would be like,
Yeah.
you know, this is gonna sound really funny, but I feel like something from like Men at Work.
Come from a land down under.
Yeah, yeah. Or
Something like that.
I'm like trying to think like maybe some Toto, so it's just like Africa. Do 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 do. All right, B, I must go.
I was talking to Sarah the other day because she went to a wedding and they played Toto. And she looks to her friend Morgan, who was like one of the few black people there, and she just, Morgan just goes, I'm really glad that these white people have a song they like. She's like, good for them. I'm really glad they have a song. So the fact that you just, oh my God, that's really funny. I'm trying to think. I feel like it would probably be like a Cat Stevens song or something. Because that's like in my blood. Like I've been listening to since I was a kid.
Unless like if you're like a Disney nerd, like all the songs you listen to actually is probably like The Little Mermaid.
Yeah, that would be like very meta in some ways if it was a Little Mermaid. Because she's a mermaid and the sirens, it's kind of all garbly-gook.
I think the point of the siren song is it has to be something that's like it's so beautiful that it just draws you into it. I think it's very like I'm not a music person, but I would imagine it's very like operatic almost, or very like hypnotic.
I imagine imagine Percy taking out his earplugs and it's just like John Cena.
John Cena, what are you doing here? But then they wouldn't be able to see the sirens be.
Yeah.
And John Cena already is in our universe. He's the Minotaur.
That's true, he's the Minotaur. Yeah.
Do you know John Cena wrote a kid's book?
I mean, I'm not surprised.
It's about a monster truck that learns to live with other regular trucks. And the great twist is, you know how like most children's books, if you go to the end, has a picture of the author?
Mm-hmm.
There's no picture, and the two characters are commenting about why is there no picture of the author? As if we can't see him.
That's really funny.
It's interesting when you have like Percy Jackson saves Annabeth and they go underwater and Percy's like, oh yeah, I forgot I have all these powers. Oh wait, Annabeth doesn't have that. And she's just drowning.
Whoopsie, she can't breathe.
Well, okay, there's like two ways this could have gone wrong. One is the really nerdy thing of, oh no, Annabeth can't breathe. I'll breathe for the both of us. And they have like a smooch.
I'm really glad that doesn't work. Yeah, that would be really weird. That would also be a very Tina Belcher thing to do.
Oh no, Jimmy Jr. is drowning. I have to breathe for the both of us.
Yeah, exactly. I could easily see that be a scene. But anyway, That doesn't happen. Instead, he just summons a bubble. He does a good old-fashioned bubble summoning.
Like he like lands in the water right next to Bikini Bottom.
The Bubble Bowl. Maybe that's the song that was playing. It's the Sweet Victory song from that episode of SpongeBob.
Sweet, sweet, sweet victory. No, you know what song actually is playing, B?
What?
It's Greasy Spoon. But the skrill is not a home.
Yeah, the phrase we came up with this weekend is when a song is really good. It's M. Night Shyamalan's The Slappening.
But yeah, no, so Percy Jackson makes a bubble for Annabeth because we can have two creepy ways of doing this, but we picked the least creepy way of having it because I'm sure in the movie that's something that happens. I haven't watched the movie, but that just sounds like something some hack screenwriter would write.
I could see that as something happening in the movie. Again, we haven't seen the movie yet, so you're going to have to screen the movie regardless of if we watched it on the show or not. Yep. Good luck. Have fun.
Oh, God.
Not my job.
I'll just like watch it when I'm at your house and you can just hear me like crying. Zach, what happened?
Yeah, just like every once in a while walking in. Are you okay, Zach?
I kind of like that Percy has, like, he kind of forgets his own powers, and you have the situation where Percy, like, figures it out, but the most important scene in this chapter actually happens in this moment. And that is, Annabeth is away from, like, the songs and stuff, and she kind of comes to her senses. And the first thing that happens is she starts crying. Like, she, like, uncontrollably sobs, and Percy doesn't want to do anything. He just wants to comfort her. As like she like bawls her eyes out, because we did talk about kind of like the vision that she has, which is Percy Jackson does like hold on to her hand, and you kind of sees the vision of what happened, which was you see New York City, Annabeth, her dad, and Athena all together, just being happy, even like this is almost like a Riverdale thing of it just being like cutesy wootsy of just having like Luke come out with like grape juice and cheese.
Yeah, it's like too over the top perfect in every way. Yeah, like that would never even happen.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden like you have what else? What other like ridiculous stuff would you think would happen in like this person's brain?
Yeah, just like a puppy runs by for no reason.
A puppy runs by and a unicorn like pops out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And then there's like a rainbow in the end. Because they see kind of like cuts back and you kind of realizes that New York has been completely demolished and made into this bigger, brighter, like utopian city.
Yeah, all made in like the mind of Annabeth, like redesigned by her.
As being like with a lot of Greek columns, everything marble. But it's like you have like this big, beautiful city, and this is what Annabeth wants. Percy kind of sees this. This is why I kind of wish you didn't see this, and kind of Annabeth kind of explains what she saw and like what her thing is. But Percy Jackson, saves her. They like go far away with the ship until like they're out of like hearing distance, and now they have the opportunity to kind of talk about what has happened. Annabeth has kind of like pulled herself back together because she had like a good sob, which is a really great character thing because you don't see people cry like uncontrollably sobbing to the point of they just want to get it all out. And not even like she wasn't ever like in like physical harm, but like she's almost like it's like a cathartic experience of just being able to cry.
Well, she was in some physical harm, but yeah.
Well, no, she didn't realize any of that happening. Like, she's not stabbed or anything. She just realizes what she had done.
To like discover her fatal flaw.
Yeah, so we actually get Annabeth's fatal flaw because she kind of talks about it, and that is she's got
the hummus, the hubris.
Yes, which is a very big fatal flaw for a lot of Greek heroes and a lot of Greek villains and a lot of just, if you think about like in all of our culture, I would consider hubris to be the biggest fatal flaw. Because you kind of have like the mustache twirling villain, I'm smarter than everybody. And then like he's almost like hoisted by his own petard a little bit.
Well, that's why, I mean, at the end, Percy is so concerned about Luke's plan because he says, if Luke's way of thinking could even tempt Annabeth, there was no telling how many other half-bloods might join him. So this like idea that like a lot of people could be tricked or drawn in by the idea that they could somehow create a better world than the one that exists now.
But then we also have this new thing of what's Percy Jackson's fatal flaw?
Yeah, we don't know yet. We're probably going to find out.
What do you think it is, B?
Oh, I don't know.
From what you know of Percy Jackson right now, technically you should know by the first end of the first book.
I mean, he's not like reckless so much, but he's like, he's willing to kind of sacrifice himself for other people. But I don't know if that's a flaw necessarily.
Well, to some people it would be considered a flaw.
He's quick to do something without like thinking it through, I guess. That might be something.
So he's impulsive?
He's impulsive, I guess, might be a flaw of his.
I mean, I can list a couple that I've noticed through the first book. It's not necessarily a spoiler. Throughout the first book, you have Percy Jackson several times throws himself off buildings to protect his friends. Yeah. So
yes.
He'll do things. He's either selfless or, you know, he relies on his friends. He does a lot of things thinking on his feet. Like his best decisions is when he doesn't think. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like he one of his fatal flaws could be he's reckless. There's a lot of things when it comes to like caring too much about situations. Like he gets like really passionate around Ares and just, you know, being passionate. And then there's a lot of things of just not giving up on people, such as with Luke. Like he's so hurt that Luke is betrayed. But it's like the idea of with Percy Jackson, you have all these things. Like there's so many different things that it could be, but maybe throughout the series we might figure out what it is. Because if you know that B is quintessentially an Achilles heel.
Have you ever seen that comic where the guy is like, Achilles, how could you? And he's like, I'm sorry, heels are my one weakness. And then it pans down to like the new high heels that he bought.
Oh, so he fell because his heel snapped? Oh no.
No, just that he bought like a new pair of heels. Because it's his one weakness.
But like moving on before we wrap this episode up, I kind of think it's important to have, you know, they're sitting on the boat and they're kind of talking about like all these things. And I think that's a really nice, sweet moment of having, hey, they're just like letting each other's hearts pour out a little bit. There's nothing romantic about this whatsoever. It's not like, I love you, Annabeth, and like we're going to work through this together. It's just like a friend helping another friend out. And I think that's a very beautiful thing as they realize that they've reached the destination. Percy Jackson in his nautical powers realizes that they're at 30 degrees, 31 minutes north, 75 degrees, 12 minutes west. We had reached the home of the Cyclops.
Man, how close are we to the end of this book? How many chapters are there?
There's 22.
Okay, so we're on next chapter's 14. We still got a good amount left, I guess, but we've made it pretty far.
Yes, and what is the name of the next chapter, B?
Chapter 14, we meet the Sheep of Doom.
What the heck is that supposed to mean?
Well, if I recall, there was a moment where Polyphemus, the Cyclops dude who's keeping Grover hostage, he gestures towards the sheep as like his sort of secret weapon to keep people out. So I imagine there's going to be some Sheep of Doom of some variety. They're going to have some sort of magical, scary powers that prevents Percy and Annabeth from saving Grover.
So Percy Jackson better be careful or he's going to be counting sheep for the rest of his life. I can't remember, there's like the comic where it's like Mary had a little lamb whose fleece was white as snow. One day Mary left. The sheep went to the club and dropped it hella low.
That's a good comic. Yeah, I mean, other than my predictions about Sheep of Doom, I don't really know what else is going to happen. They're probably going to see Grover. I don't know if they're going to get to Grover. I don't know if they're going to see the Cyclops right away. But they're definitely going to encounter some intense sheep blocking their path.
Well, hopefully they can get sheep done.
I have no idea what's going to happen in the meantime. I mean, I don't think they're going to rescue him right away because there's a lot of book left and there's a lot of loose threads in place, but we'll see.
Well, B, the most important thing is we're only on chapter 14. The sheep hasn't hit the fan yet.
Yep. Exactly. So who knows what's going to happen? Yeah, I have no idea. Other than that, what's going to happen? They're going to see Grover. Maybe they're going to rescue him. Probably not. If they are, then I guess he's going to join them in trying to help, I guess, rescue Camp Half-Blood because they need to go back. Then there's a whole thing with Tantalus, which I completely forgot about. There's a lot of threads going on. Yeah, there's Tyson, who's probably still alive, going to make a return. There's a lot. But I think what's going to happen is they're probably going to not succeed in rescuing Grover and they're going to have to come back later, or they do rescue him and he becomes a part of their crew and then he helps them with the rest of the stuff they need to wrap up, which is finding out if Tyson's still alive. He probably is. Dealing with Luke to some extent and the sarcophagus, with Kronos, dealing with Tantalus, going back to Camp Half-Blood, bringing the fleece so they can save Talia's tree and therefore save the camp.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of things at stake when it comes to this because there's still a lot of chapters left. I always get like really scared when there's like they've had the main resolve and then all of a sudden you realize there's like 100 pages left and like
yeah, a lot can go wrong.
see, like you should always like a lot can go wrong until the last sentence in the last period.
Yeah, I guess we'll just have to see.
Because some of the best books I've ever written, the main twist or whatever usually happens at the end.
Yeah, other than that, I don't know if I have much other guesses. I know that all that stuff needs to happen at some point in the upcoming chapters. I don't know what order, though. And I'm not even 100% certain that they're going to be able to rescue Grover.
So, B, did we get any listener mail this week?
Yes, we did. We got an email from Megan. And she says, "Hi, Zach and B. My name is Megan. I am 16 and a daughter of Athena. I'm listening from Michigan, and I found this podcast about a week ago and have fallen in love with it. This podcast gives me something to listen to during passing time and on the bus. It is great to see B try to guess what will happen next. As someone who only read the Percy Jackson series a year ago, I noticed some of the real-life issues with the books that you've talked about. However, it is really cool how in-depth you go with these subjects, along with the references to other children's books. I already know you plan to, but please keep going. But please keep doing what you're doing. It is really fun. One question I have is, what is your favorite type of mythology? Greek, Roman, Norse, etc. And mythological story. Thank you so much. Bye."
Ooh, that one's hard.
Yeah, that's pretty hard. I'm not that well versed in mythology, I would say, compared to a lot of people.
Well, because I actually have one which I would consider mythology, because it's kind of like, how would you label mythology? I'm sure there's like an actual like, clinical answer for it, but I would imagine it's like a story that's passed down orally, usually kind of to explain a situation. And I would say I actually like European folklore a lot.
Oh, yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah.
If I had to answer the question with this when it came to like mythology, it'd have to be Norse mythology a little bit, because like everything about Norse mythology is so cool, especially when you have like things that are very like steeped into, because for me, I like a lot of epic fantasy, and a lot of things are steeped in Norse mythology, same as with Greek mythology, but you have stories with like Odin, you have a lot of stories with Loki, Thor, like yes, you can look at the Marvel stuff. Actually, if you want a really good book, you should actually get Norse Mythology by Neil Gaiman. It's a very great collection of stories. And there's like a lot of the stories that they have in Norse mythology are a lot of like people trying to trick each other in like clever ways. Especially like I really enjoy when it comes to the mythology, their version of the afterlife is really cool, where you have Valhalla. So when you die, like you die, but if you're selected by the Valkyries, who are all women, you are chosen, you are worthy, you will go to Valhalla, where you'll train until Ragnarok happens, which is the end of the world.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I don't think I really have much of a specific love of mythology. I like things that are based in mythology a lot of times, like fantasy or whatever, but it's not like I have a specific story like, oh, I really love the story of Narcissus or whatever. Like I don't have a specific.
It's kind of like you have to pick and choose. It's like I would consider like when you have like mythology, like there's no. I guess I'm sure there's like a clinical answer for it, but I would imagine like you can say like the Brothers Grimm or like European fairy tales and folklore.
Yeah, that's true too. I mean, like even fairy tales and stuff. Like Celtic mythology is kind of really interesting to me. Like the sort of idea of like fairies and sprites and leprechauns and all that is really interesting. And then sometimes I just think about like folklore kind of stories, like Rip Van Winkle, which I guess I feel like a sense of connection to that story just because it takes place in like the Catskills and I like live in New York, and so like all those kinds of like Washington Irving stories are kind of related to like the place where I live, or like even like the Legend of Sleepy Hollow too. Like Sleepy Hollow is only like a half an hour away from me.
When it comes to that stuff, especially like American, like I guess tall tales like Johnny Appleseed and Paul Bunyan, you can like label as like mythology now.
Yeah, I mean it's any kind of story you use to like tell some sort of parable, I imagine.
Well, then you can have like Aesop's fables as well. You can have, because that's technically like a mythology and like a morality tale.
As far as like the examples that Megan sends us, Greek, Roman, or Norse, I do kind of agree with you that Norse is like one of the more interesting ones to me, for whatever
Oh,
reason.
heck yeah. Like, there's nothing cooler than Valkyries.
What other listener correspondence did we get this week, Zach?
So we have an email from Jack. Hi, Zach and B. I was a big fan of Percy Jackson as a kid, and more recently, I've become more interested in literary analysis. This being evident by the fact that I somehow enrolled in 2 English lit classes in the same semester. I stumbled upon your podcast a while ago, and I have been enjoying getting reintroduced to the world through the eyes of someone other than myself from 13 years ago. Anyway, long introduction aside, here's the point of the email. As I mentioned before, I'm currently taking 2 English lit classes. One of them, we just started reading A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court by Mark Twain. In the book, the main character is transported to England around the time of King Arthur. I just started reading the book, so I don't really know what happened after that, but it seems very similar to the Ironclad from Chapter 11. People in various states and aliveness from different times are meeting, and Rickard even goes so far to have the dead Confederates call him a Yankee. And if this hadn't been a YA novel, Percy probably would have had a conversation with the dead Confederates all about how slavery is bad. Does it seem like I'm grasping at straws, or does this feel like this might have been a source of inspiration for Riordan? Do you have any ideas on what I'm talking about, or does my English professor just like really obscure novels? Sorry to ask a question about something that happened a while ago, but I thought it was a little too similar to not be unspoken. Thanks for answering my questions, and always keep up the great work.
I mean, I don't think that that's super obscure as a book, right? I've heard of that book before. I've never read it. But,
I actually really like that book. I've read that book. Actually, if you want a really good version, if you want to, because if you're taking like a lit class, you should at least read it first or listen to an audiobook. Nick Offerman actually does a version of it on Audible.
That sounds really good. I bet his reading is very dramatic, to say the least.
Like, I've actually read that book. I'm actually a really big Mark Twain fan. And it reminds me of a movie that's for kids called A Kid in King Arthur's Court. You can also watch that too. It's very similar to that. Except in that movie, the kid invents cheeseburgers and bicycles in King Arthur's time. And baseball. The whole movie's about baseball.
Which is anachronistic and inaccurate, but it's fine.
Or my best version of that is Army of Darkness.
So do you think that there's a connection? Because I think that even if there's not an explicit connection of like, oh, Rick Riordan read this and was like, oh, I'm inspired by this to include this in my book, it's more just like coming from a longer tradition of like time travel novels or like fish out of water novels of like, oh, I'm like from this time period and you're from this time period and we're interacting. Like, I think that's a pretty common storytelling device.
I'm sure Rick Riordan read that book because a lot of people have actually read that book a lot. Same as with, though, I don't consider that to be an obscure reference because, like you said before, a lot of things do revolve around time travel, and that is actually one of the early time travel stories. What I think when it comes to it is it's the same way as I'm going to look at it from how you can have a movie from, like, let's say the 80s, and you look at it from a modern perspective, and it's like, oh, how didn't they know back then kind of mentality. That's why it's like, even if, you know, this wasn't a YA novel, I still think that Percy Jackson would have brought up slavery, but it's kind of like it wasn't important to the story because, again, you have to look at it. It's a kid's book, and the whole thing of it is it's a joke. It's supposed to be like a fish out of water story. It's like, how uncommon can it be to have like an ironclad warship in the middle of this story that's so American?
Yeah, that would have been like a whole thing that maybe would have like been too off track for the plot. It wouldn't have been relevant enough.
If you had that moment where Percy Jackson sat down with the Confederate soldier, nothing would have gotten done because the Confederate soldier, it's like trying to explain to like a person that's like 300 years old what the internet is. They're never going to understand what it is. They might think they do.
Yeah, it wouldn't have been a productive conversation, probably.
But it's like you're talking to a literal dead guy. He's not going to change his ways.
Yeah, but I don't think it's too much of a jump to say that Rick Riordan might have been somewhat inspired by that.
If you pick up like some of the context clues, I also think that Rick Riordan really studied the Civil War because if you read the chapter, look specifically at the details Rick Riordan gives to the ship and kind of like everything in that surrounding prior to when they meet the monster. And he goes very in detail in very short words and how much he likes Civil War ships.
Yeah, I mean, that's not surprising because, like, the way that it reads on the page is like, oh, wow, Rick, you really know a lot about Civil War ships, huh?
Thanks again for that wonderful, wonderful email. We really appreciate it.
Did we get any other?
So we actually got 2
response?
iTunes reviews. One of them is from Klaus Baudelaire. And it says, the description just says, yes, I finally found it. The body of the review is, I finally found it, and like a bunch of like exclamation marks.
Yeah.
I hope you found what you were looking for. Did you find the sugar bowl, Klaus?
Klaus found our podcast, and he's very excited about it. Thank you, Klaus.
I'm sure you know what? I think he was like trying to give us like a secret code. Maybe he found the sugar bowl. So we have one more iTunes review. It's from Bookhugger 1738, and it just says Iris message. This is a great idea. I love how B hasn't read the books yet and that they make such wild predictions that are sort of true. I'm near the 5th episode. Anyways, I was wondering if I could make a podcast sort of like this, but Harry Potter or Aragon. I know you don't Aragon, but whatever. Or some other fantasy series. Thanks.
I mean, you can make any podcast you want.
I mean, there's plenty of Harry Potter podcasts, but I mean, if you can bring something new and different, go for it.
There's a lot of Harry Potter podcasts. Yes, there's dozens and dozens and dozens of them. So,
I listen to like some of them that I listen to is The Real Weird Sisters, Harry Potter and the Sacred Text, Little Potters, and I think I used to listen to the Harry Potter Book Club.
Yeah, there's quite a lot. So, if you don't mind like a crowded field of people, then that's definitely something you could do. I don't know if there's an Aragon podcast. If there isn't, you could start one. You could be the first person.
Oh, yeah, totally go for it. Well, apparently we don't do Aragon. That sounds like almost like doing like drugs or something. Oh, you don't
Yeah.
you don't do Aragon? You're not like cool like us?
I mean, I'm not familiar with Aragon in the sense that I didn't read it as a kid, but I know of its existence and I know that it's about dragons. And it was written by a child.
And ironically, when this came out, they announced the new Aragon book coming out. I mean, if you like Aragon, go for it. I feel like there's a lot you can do with that, especially the way you should like structure your show should be either if you want to talk about all this information all at once, or if you want to take your time and kind of like dissect it and just go piece by piece, chapter by chapter. It all depends on different books. Like I'll give an example. Like actually, a fun fact: before we wanted to do one on Percy Jackson, I gave B 2 options. What were they, B? Like, hey, we should do a podcast on these books.
Oh, yeah. You were like, we could do Percy Jackson or we could do, what is it? Patrick Rothfuss. I don't remember the name of the book series.
Oh, The Name of the Wind and the King Killer Chronicles.
Yeah. And then I was like, oh, I've always been meant to read the Percy Jackson series. I've been wanting to do that. So that's the idea that I picked out of the 2. And then we did a podcast. We would have done a podcast together regardless if we found a subject. It was destined to be.
Oh, yeah. There's so many different books and book series you can do. Like, I thought of, like, so many different ones. But you should do whatever you want to do. Especially, this is any advice for anybody. Just do it. Just make your podcast. You'll be so much happier. Don't put it off.
Yeah. It doesn't take a lot to start, really. Like a decent microphone you can get for like
a decent microphone, not even, as long as you like look and understand, like,
yeah, as long as people can hear what you're saying, basically.
Yeah, and you can like just take your time, learn how to use Audacity, just go on YouTube, look at how to make good quality podcast, and we're more than willing to help you when it comes to that. If you have any questions, just email us and we'll email you back any advice or any videos you could like look at for that. We're not alone.
The more the merrier.
I think that kind of like wraps up the show, B.
Yeah, I guess it does.
Where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter at @BKellyGorman, and you can find me on Tumblr at twinpoetry.tumblr.com.
And if you want to find me, you can find me on Twitter at Suda41, that's SUDA41. And if you want to follow our show on Twitter, it's at halfblood_radio. If you want to email the show, you can email us at radiocamphhalfblood@gmail.com. We'll read any messages you send to us. We really appreciate it. This episode's sponsored by 9 from the 9 Worlds.
The Magnus Chase and the Gods of Asgard trilogy may have concluded, but we haven't heard the last of our favorite peeps from the Nine Worlds. Join Hearthstone, Blitzen, Samira, Alex, Jack, TJ, Mallory, Halfborn, and more on a hilarious and unforgettable journey through Rick Riordan's unique take on Norse mythology.
The perfect gift for Magnus Chase fans.
Available now in hardback and audiobook.
Feel the power of 9. I'm Zach.
I'm B.
And keep staying mortal. Bye.